Good morning, California time, and welcome everyone to the Ramana Maharshi International Satsang based here in the beautiful city of San Diego. Let us welcome our special guest every first Sunday of the month from London, the International Ramana Maharshi scholar and friend, Michael James. Michael, good to see you as always.
Good to see you too.
And for those of you watching us on YouTube, Michael joins us every first Sunday of the month at 10 o'clock in the morning, California time. So go to Google and figure out what time it is for you. If you would like to join us live on Zoom with Michael, you are welcome to do so. Just write to me. I'm Ted, newsguy55 at AOL.com, and you'll be put on our mailing list. Our International Ramana discussion group is here every Sunday of the year that Michael doesn't join us. And of course, everybody's welcome to join us with that. You can just drop in anytime you want or every time you want. So let's get started now with our first question. And it comes from Johan. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And it's a very lengthy question, but Michael and I have both gone over this. Michael and I agree with Michael that it's necessary to read the whole thing. I have a strong feeling, Michael, a lot of people are going to relate to this, so I'm really glad you put it at the top of the list. So Johan writes, Michael, even if I hear you say it again and again, I still wish to have clarifications over self-investigation. More precisely, how to make sure I'm doing it the right way. You say, turn inward and be as you are, I am, etc. But as awareness is not something to obtain, not an object that can be described or even felt, nothing to see or smell either, how can I be certain I'm doing self-investigation the right way? There is silence all the time. There are no thoughts, even for a nanosecond. That silence, that calmness is always there. As soon as I wake up in the morning, during the day, always. I understand that it is not awareness, because as long as I'm Johan, the body mind, it cannot be. But then while not bothering about anything and investigating, as there are no steps and no goals, no object to find and nothing to feel, the question is, how can I be sure I'm doing it the right way? If there is nothing going on, which is the case, then what am I supposed to do? She asks. Can you be more precise in your details about self-investigation? As awareness is nothing we can identify or feel as long as we think that we're the body mind, so awareness has nothing to do with everything that we know. I think it's crucial to deeply understand, not just to mentally, but also as a profound conviction, how do we practice self-investigation? Because just turning within is not enough. Reading Ramana's teaching is not enough. Listening to Michael's videos is not enough, she goes on. Something is still missing. The key for knowing for sure that what I call self-investigating is indeed self-investigation. As long as that key is missing, though, it can be just losing time at being quiet. That's nice, but it has nothing to do with the definite quest. There is something. If it comes from a deep letting go of the idea, the rooted idea of being a body mind, well, then there's the calmness feeling that shows up. And then what? A crucial key is missing. Michael, take it from there.
Okay. Firstly, it's important to understand nothing is missing. What we are investigating is what we always know. We always know that I am. We don't know what I am. So what we are investigating is ourself. Regarding the question how to investigate, Bhagavan has given a very clear and simple definition of what he means by Atma-vichara, self-investigation, in the paragraph of Nana. He says, I'll say it in Tamil first and then I'll explain in English. Sada kalamum manate atma-vichara Atma-vicharam endrupaya. That literally means the name Atma-vichara is only for always keeping the mind on oneself. Keeping the mind on ourself, that means keeping our attention on ourself. So what is this? What people fail to grasp is what is meant by Atman. Atman is often translated as the self, as if it were a thing. But there's no such thing as Atman other than ourself. Atman simply means ourself. So what we're investigating is ourself. So in order to understand what we're to investigate, we need to understand what we are. We are not this body or mind. We are not anything that appears and disappears. We are not any, to use an analogy, we are not any of the pictures that appear on the screen. We are the screen itself. So to say something is missing is like saying, I went to a cinema and I watched the film, but something was missing. I was told there was a screen there, but I didn't see any screen. I only saw the pictures. The screen is always there. The screen is the base on which the pictures appear. Likewise, we are the base on which all these multitude of phenomena appear. All these phenomena appear in awareness. Awareness is not something unknown. That is our awareness is the basis of all knowledge, so it can never be something unknown. Of course, it's not an object, so we can't attend to it like we attend to an object, but we all are clearly aware, I am. Is there anyone who doesn't know I am? We cannot be aware without being aware, I am. Because in order to be aware, we must be aware, I am aware. And to be aware, I am aware, we must be aware, I am. So that awareness of our own being, that is the basis. All this awareness of things other than ourselves is superimposed, just like the pictures are superimposed on the screen, all awareness of everything other than ourselves is superimposed upon this fundamental awareness I am, which is ever shining. Not only does it shine in waking and dream, it shines in sleep also, because it's eternal. Who is now awake? I am awake. Who is it who was dreaming? I was dreaming. Who is it who was asleep? I was asleep. So the same I is existing and shining in all three states. In waking and dream, this I is mixed and conflated with adjuncts. So we are each now aware of ourselves as I am this body, I am a person, I am Michael, or I am Ted, or I am Joanne, or whoever. That is an adjunct conflated awareness. What is conflated? That is that adjunct, the name and form of a body that we take ourselves to be, is superimposed upon this fundamental awareness I am. But even when I'm aware of myself as I am Michael, or I am Ted, or I am Joanne, or I am whoever, I never cease to be aware I am. So the awareness I am is the fundamental awareness. That is what we actually are. That is what we need to investigate. Everything else, our identity and all these things we know, these are things that appear and disappear. We seem to be a certain person, but only in waking and dream. In sleep, we don't seem to be a person, but we don't cease to be aware I am. So sleep is a state in which we experience this pure awareness I am in an unadulterated state, in its pristine purity. So this is why understanding that awareness does not cease in sleep is extremely important. Understanding it and recognizing what it means. What ceases to exist in sleep is awareness of anything other than ourself. But the fundamental awareness I am remains. The same awareness but remains in sleep, namely that awareness I am, is shining now. But now it's shining mixed and conflated with adjuncts, but we never cease to be aware I am. So that is when Bhagavan says we need to fix the mind on ourself, we need to keeping the mind fixed on us, always keeping the mind fixed on ourself, alone is Atma-vichara. What he means by fixing the mind on ourself is fixing our mind on this fundamental awareness, I am, which is our very being, is what we actually are. It is the only thing that is permanent. Everything else appears and disappears. Everything else undergoes change. Everything else is an object or phenomena, something known by us. So what knows all these things is awareness. But we need to understand better what knows all these phenomena is the awareness called ego. The defining characteristics of ego, as ego, we are always aware, I am this body, and we are consequently aware of things other than ourselves. But this is a false appearance, because what ego essentially is, what it actually is only this fundamental awareness I am. So we seem to be aware of other things when we're aware of ourselves as I am this body. But when we cease to be aware I am this body, and therefore cease to be aware of other things, we never cease to be aware I am. So this fundamental awareness is what we actually are. That is what we are to investigate. In this question, Joanne said, but as awareness is not something to obtain, not an object that can be described or even felt. That is, it is not an object. It is not something to obtain because it's something that we are that. So it's not something to be obtained. But to say even felt, it's not felt as an object, but we always know I am. We are always clearly aware of awareness. So the awareness we seek to know is not something that is unknown to us. We are always aware I am. The problem is now we are, instead of being aware just I am, we are aware I am this body, I am this person, I'm such and such a person. So because of this conflation of adjuncts, we are not aware of ourselves as we actually are. So though we know that we are, we don't know what we are because we mistake ourselves to be something other than ourselves. So in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to know ourselves in isolation from all other things. So, but in order to know ourselves in isolation from all other things, all we need to do is to turn our attention back towards ourselves. To the extent to which we turn our attention towards ourselves, we thereby withdraw it from everything else. So as we go deeper and deeper in this practice, the awareness of other things recedes more and more into the background, so to speak, and we come closer to experiencing ourselves as pure awareness. So this practice is actually very, very easy if we understand what it is. If we understand what it is, there will be no question of how can I be sure that I'm doing it the right way. That is it. The one thing that is most clear to all of us is I am. Who knows this? I know it. Who is doing this? I am doing it. So that this awareness I is the ground, it's the substratum of all experience. That is what we are to investigate. But we need to think about this very carefully and understand it very carefully. But what is always shining as our own being, as I am, that is what we actually are. That is what we are to investigate. So some people say, how can you attend to it because it's not an object? But there again, we need to try to attend just to ourselves. the practice will become clear to us to the extent to which we put it into practice. That is, we need a certain degree of clarity of understanding even to begin practicing, because if we don't have that clarity of understanding, we will be attending to something else, thinking that we're attending to ourselves. So first we need to understand that we are not anything that appears and disappears. We are that which is eternal. This is why the first requirement for following this path is what is called nitya anitya vastu viveka. That means distinguishing the permanent from the impermanent, the eternal from the ephemeral. The only thing that is permanent is ourself, this awareness I am. Everything else is impermanent. Everything else appears and disappears. So we are not to attend to anything that appears or disappears. We are not to attend to anything other than ourself. We are to attend just to ourselves, just to this basic awareness. As I said, but awareness in its pure form is just awareness. It's not awareness of anything. It's just pure awareness. So the awareness that is aware of things is ego. But it's not that there are two awarenesses. There's only one awareness. Well, there's the one real awareness, I am, that now seems to be ego because it's mixed with adjuncts. So just like the rope and the snake that the rope seems to be are not two different things. They're one and the same thing. Ego and what we actually are not two different things. What we actually are is this fundamental awareness, I am. But we seem to be ego, the false awareness, I am this body, which is the awareness that knows all other things. But since they are one and the same awareness, just like if, supposing we're walking on a dark path with Bhagavan, and we see something lying on the path ahead of us, to us it looks like a snake. So we're afraid to, we say, oh, Bhagavan, but there's a snake there. Then Bhagavan shows us, no, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. But to us, it still looks like a snake. So Bhagavan knows the only way to remove our fear is for us to see it as it actually is. So he says, look at it carefully. Some people ask, that the question was often asked to Bhagavan, what is the I that I should attend to? Is it the self or is it ego? By the self, they mean what we actually are. In answer to such questions, Bhagavan always said ego. Why did he say that? Because their question they ask is like asking, when Bhagavan says, look at it carefully, if you say, which it should I look at? Should I look at the snake or at the rope? Because we see it as a snake, Bhagavan will say, just look at the snake, that's sufficient. Because if we look at the snake carefully enough, what will we see? Oh, it's not a snake, it's just a rope. So looking at the snake and looking at the rope are the same thing. So whether we think of this self-investigation in terms of attending to ego or attending to the fundamental awareness I am, it's the same thing. Because there's only one awareness I am. That one awareness I am now seems to be ego, but if we look at it carefully enough, if we attend to ourselves carefully enough, we will see that it is nothing but pure awareness. So why I say that, we shouldn't think that we're looking for some unknown awareness. The awareness we are investigating is ourself. It's the one thing that we always know. So further on, Joanne says, I understand that it's not awareness because as long as I think I am Joanne, the body-mind, it cannot be. But the I that thinks I am Joanne, the body-mind, is that awareness we're talking about. Now that awareness is mixed up with adjuncts as I think, I am Joanne. But that I is ever the pure I. So that's all we need to attend to. And that itself is awareness. This is why one of the very useful clues Bhagavan gave us for this practice is to investigate to whom does this appear. That is, whatever may appear, thoughts or phenomena. According to Bhagavan, all phenomena are just thoughts, but whether it's external phenomena or internal phenomena, to whom does it appear? It appears to me. So investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourself, the one to whom it appears. So what we're investigating is that awareness to which all other things appear. Like this, Bhagavan has given us so many clues. If we understand these clues correctly, it'll be very clear what this practice is. If we have any doubt, if we still doubt, how do we practice self-investigation? How am I sure that I'm doing it right? That indicates that we still haven't thought about it carefully enough and understood. What we are investigating is what is ever shining, not shining as something other than ourselves, but shining as ourself alone, that fundamental awareness I am. Another thing Joanne says is just turning within is not enough. If we don't understand what turning within means, then it's not enough. But if we understand what Bhagavan means by turning within, then that's all that is required. That is, when Bhagavan talks about turning within, inside and outside, within and without, these are relative terms. So, for example, in terms of the body, the clothes I'm wearing are outside, but the organs, the heart and the liver and all these things are inside. But Bhagavan isn't asking us to turn to look inside the body. He's not even asking us to turn. Okay, and then in terms of the mind, thoughts seem to be in the mind, the world seems to be outside. But when Bhagavan asks us to turn within, he's not asking us to look at thoughts. When he asks us to turn within, what he means is turn back to that which is innermost. That is ourself, this fundamental awareness I am. Everything else, everything that appears and disappears is external. So turning within, in the sense in which Bhagavan means it, is turning our attention back towards ourself. What is within is only ourself, nothing other than ourself. Everything else, everything that appears and disappears is external. So, as I say, if we understand what Bhagavan means by turning within, then just turning within is enough. That's all that is required. We need to turn our attention, which is now facing outwards towards phenomena, towards thoughts, feelings, perceptions, memories, all these things that appear and disappear. We need to turn it back to the one to whom it all appears. Turning to attend to that to which all other things appear, that is what Bhagavan means by turning within. So when Joanne says something is missing, something seems to be missing if we don't clearly understand what Bhagavan means by oneself. When he says that Atma-vichara is just always keeping the mind on oneself, if he were to ask us to keep our mind on some mantra or some name or form of God or some point in the body, some chakra or something, that's an object. We understand what that means. But when he asks us to attend to ourself, we need to understand what he means by ourself. Ourself is not an object, but though it's not an object and cannot be known as an object, it is the one thing that exists and shines whether objects appear or disappear. It's the one fundamental reality. It's what we are always aware of, without a break, throughout waking, dream, and sleep. So this is where a correct understanding is necessary. The understanding will not enable us to know what we are, but it will enable us to investigate what we are. And only by investigating what we are And investigating in this context means just attending to ourselves, fixing the mind on ourselves. That understanding will enable us to investigate, and the investigation will enable us to know ourselves as we actually are. So the understanding, we can understand to a certain extent by studying Bhagavan's teachings, because Bhagavan's teachings are all pointers, pointing our attention back towards ourselves. So we need to pay very close attention to what Bhagavan has taught us, and we need to think about it carefully to make sense of it. We need to understand what he means by ourself, Atman. It is just this fundamental awareness, I am. That's all we need to attend to. But though we can understand this to a certain extent by words, we can truly understand it only to the extent to which we put it into practice. So at first, it may not be very clear, but the more we attend to ourselves, the clearer it will become. The clearer it will become to us, but we are something distinct from everything that appears and disappears. So all we need to hold on to is to hold on to ourselves, and we don't have to ignore other things. If we try to ignore something, we are thinking about it. Our attention is on it. If there's some noise going on and I try to ignore it, so long as I'm trying to ignore it, I'll continue hearing the noise. If I want to effectively ignore it, I need to put my attention on something else. So if the noise is disturbing me, I read a book. And because if the book is interesting, that takes all my attention, and then I don't even notice what noise is going on. So in order to ignore all thoughts, all phenomena, everything that appears and disappears, all we need to do is to fix our attention on ourselves. To the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we are thereby withdrawing our attention from everything else. So that is the effective way of ignoring things, of not bothering about thoughts, as she says, or not bothering about the noises or whatever it is. We can effectively not bother about anything other than ourselves only by attending to ourselves so keenly, but our attention isn't going out towards those things. We've all experienced at times when, for example, we may be reading a very interesting book or watching a very interesting film. Because our attention is so absorbed in what we are doing, we don't notice. We may be hungry, we may have an urge to go to the toilet or something, but we don't even notice it because our attention is so firmly fixed on that. And when the film comes to an end or the book comes to an end, we suddenly notice, oh, I'm desperate to go to the toilet, and we rush to the toilet. So we can effectively ignore everything only by focusing our attention on ourselves alone. To the extent to which we focus our attention on ourselves, it's automatically withdrawn from everything else. So Bhagavan has asked us to do just one very, very simple thing. He's asked us to attend to ourselves. He doesn't ask us to do anything else. Attending to ourselves is all that is required, because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside. And to the extent to which we as ego subside, what we actually are is alone what will remain. That is, so long as we're in the stage of practice, ego does not disappear entirely. It's ego that is doing this practice. But when we attend to ourselves so keenly that we entirely cease being aware of anything else, we will then experience ourselves as pure awareness. And as soon as we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is thereby destroyed, because ego is the impure awareness, the adjunct conflated awareness, I am this body. When we experience ourselves just as that pure awareness, the awareness that is not aware of anything other than itself, that is what destroys ego. So until we reach that point, we just need to persevere in this practice. And Bhagavan has given us so many clues. For example, in the 11th paragraph of Nana, there's a sentence in which he says, Oruvantan Sarupam Adeyam Varayil, Nirantara Swarupa Smaranaye Kai Patruvanayin Aduandre Podum. That means until one attains Swarupa, until one attains one's own real nature, in other words, until we remain as we actually are, if we cling to uninterrupted Swarupa Smarana, that means remembrance of our real nature or self-remembrance, if we cling to that self-remembrance, that alone is sufficient. So nothing else is necessary. Self-remembrance is another way of expressing self-attentiveness. It amounts to the same thing. When we remember something, our attention is on that thing. So, but when we sometimes this small change of words can be a vital clue to us. So when Bhagavan says self-remembrance, all we have to remember is I am. Not remembering the words I am, but what the words I am refer to, our own being. That's all we need to do, to hold on to that remembrance of our being. So that is, there is never a moment when we are not aware I am. But the problem is, throughout most of the waking and dream state, we are so interested in attending to other things, but we overlook this ever-shining awareness I am. Because this awareness I am, if we are not drawn to this path to find out what we actually are, the awareness I am seems to us to be something very uninteresting. Yes, it's there all the time. I'm always aware I am, so what? But when we understand that's all we need to know, is to know what we actually are, that as that interest to know who am I increases, the attention will automatically be withdrawn from other things and fixed on ourselves. So it's a matter, the practice is a matter of slowly weaning our interest, our attention away from other things and cultivating the deep interest, the deep love to know and to be what we actually are. I know whatever words are put, whatever, in however many different ways this is expressed, the words will always be inadequate. Whatever words were used by Bhagavan, whatever words may be used by anyone who tries to explain this, the words can be no more than pointers. Because the one thing we cannot that is, we all know what it is, what is meant by awareness, but there's nothing we can. Awareness is devoid of any features. It's not something that we can describe. It's not something that can be put in words. It's not an object. So it's something very, very subtle, but at the same time very, very obvious. It's the one thing, as Murugan says in the there's a song called Atma-vichara. That's Atma-vichara is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit term Atma-vichara. That means knowing oneself. That song, Murugan wrote the, it's a kirtana, it's a particular style of song, but consists of a refrain, a post-refrain, and a series of verses. So Murugan wrote the refrain and the post-refrain and asked Bhagavan to compose the verses. And so Bhagavan composed in the verses confirm what Murugan said in the refrain. What Murugan sings is Aye ati solapum anma vide aye ati solapum. That means extremely easy. Atma-vichara, that's knowing oneself, extremely easy. And then in the post-refrain, what he says is, oneself exists as so very real, even for those who are simple-minded, that an amalaka fruit on the palm ends as unreal. What he means by that is, there's a term that is commonly used in most Indian languages. If you want to say something is very, very clear, patently obvious, you say it's as clear as an amalaka on the palm. Amalaka is in Hindi, I think it's called amla. In Tamil, it's called nelikai. It's a small fruit about the size of a grape. So when that's on your hand, it's something that is very, very clear, very, very obvious. So that's used as an analogy. As if you say something is as clear as an amalaka on the hand, it means it's very, very obvious. But Murugan here says, even that amalaka fruit on the hand, it fades into, becomes unreal in comparison to how very, very real we are so far. Even the most simple-minded person, that means even not only human beings, even animals, all are aware of themselves as I am. It's because of this, but because this I am is mixed with a body identification, we all the desires come, because as a body we need food, we need, well, if we're humans, we need clothing. Animals don't even need clothing, but they need to protect themselves from the elements. They need to protect themselves from predators. So any embodied being, but that is once we take on a body, we take on a whole set of desires and needs and so on. But what is that is aware of itself as I am this body? I'm not just talking about the words I am this body. That is, animals are also aware I am this body. That a dog is aware, it won't think it's not thinking in terms of human language, but it's very, very well aware of itself as I am this body. Like that, every creature is aware of itself as I am this body. But what is that I am that is identifying with that body? What we actually are is not what we take ourselves to be, but that which identifies with it. Well, even that's not quite true. That which identifies itself as I am this body is ego. But in that ego, the essential element of ego is this fundamental awareness I am. So that's why Murugan says, even for the most simple-minded, implying not only for the most simple-minded person, for the most simple-minded of any creature, all are clearly aware I am. So knowing this I am as it actually is not difficult. Why it seems to be difficult, because we have so much liking to go outwards. We have so much liking to experience things other than ourselves. So one of the things Joanne says, what am I to do? We are not to do anything other than just attend to our being. To the extent to which we attend to our being, we as ego subside and remain as being. And that's all there is to it. It's the path Bhagavan has taught us is so, so simple. And if we understand it correctly, it's so obvious. But this problem in understanding this is not a new thing. Even in Bhagavan's time, there were so many people who had difficulty understanding it. Murugan told, sorry, not Murugan, Swami Natyanananda told me a story. But once, when he was in Bhagavan's presence, there was someone who was questioning Bhagavan, saying, but what is this self that I have to attend to? And they were going on pestering, and Bhagavan was very patiently replying to their question, but they still weren't satisfied. And finally, Natyanananda became exasperated. And he said, is it not obvious? You're standing there like a stone. There's in Tamil villages, often in the center of the village, there'll be a planted stone in the middle of a village, which is used by animals. They'll come and rub on it. It's often used for tying animals too. It's serving so many purposes, but it's just a stone standing there in the middle of the village. That's called a natankal. Natyananda said, you are there like a natankal. Can you not see yourself? And Bhagavan said, bele, bele, but that Bhagavan expressed approval. And whether that person understood or not, I don't know. But that was a beautiful way Natyananda expressed it. But one thing that is so, so clear, As Murugan said, even to the most simple-minded, we all know I am. That's all we have to attend to. That doesn't mean we attend to the words I am. That means we attend to what the words I am refer to. It refers to our own being. I am means I exist. So that am is the verb to be. So it's referring to our being. So if we understand it, it's so clear. If we don't understand it, then we need to think about it and make sense of it, because we are not searching for anything elusive. We are investigating. We're not looking for something. We should be looking at something, looking at ourselves. It's not some unknown thing that we're asked to investigate. As Bhagavan often said, if Atma-vichara, self-knowledge, were a new knowledge to be attained, whatever is attained will be gained and it will be lost, because whatever comes will go. But the knowledge we are seeking is the knowledge that is ever present, ever shining within us as this fundamental awareness I am. So in verse 13 of Ulladu, Bhagavan says, Jnanamam tane me. That means oneself, who is awareness, jnana, alone is real. So that what he means there by jnana is that pure awareness, that awareness I am. That alone is what is real. That is the one thing that we always know, whether we know other things or not. We always know I am. So we need to think about this carefully, and each of us have to understand it for ourselves. The words can only be pointers, but it's up to us to understand it. And in order to understand it, we need to think. This is why in classical Advaita, they always talk about Sravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Sravana literally means hearing, but in this case, it means either hearing the words of a guru or studying the words of guru, not just casually hearing them, but very attentively listening to or studying the words of guru. So understanding what Bhagavan, grasping what Bhagavan is actually saying, but then having heard what he has to say, we have to make sense of it. Because when we hear something, each of us understand it in our own way. So we need to think about it very carefully in order to make sense of it, in order to imbibe it and be fully convinced by it. That is called manana. Manana is the, sometimes it's translated as reflection. It means thinking deeply about it, making sense of the words Bhagavan has said. And then the third is nididhyasana. Nididhyasana means deep contemplation. That is the practice of self-investigation. So if we are not sure how to practice self-investigation, we need to go back to the words of Bhagavan. What does Bhagavan say? What the practice of self-investigation is, just keeping our mind fixed on ourselves. That means keeping our attention fixed on ourselves. So what is the self that we have to attend to? It's not anything other than ourselves. It's the one thing that we always know, this fundamental awareness I am. So, I can go on and on talking about this, but I'll be going round and round in circles, because ultimately each one of us has to understand this for ourselves. We have to pay close attention to what Bhagavan has taught us. We need to think about it carefully to make sense of it. And then we need to put it into practice. To the extent to which we put it into practice with a proper understanding, it will become clearer and clearer and clearer to us. Because there's nothing that is more clear than I am. It's not an object. It's not something that can be pointed out. Oh, this is the I am. No, it is the ground. It is the basis of all experience. It is what we actually are. It is that to which all other things appear and disappear. So whether that's an adequate answer or not, I don't know, but that's the best I can do, because ultimately each one of us has to understand this for ourselves.
I'll be brief. Focusing on the I am self, as I do every day.
Mm.
For me, it seems to require what I call a very brief conscious shift in consciousness from the I am thought to the I am self. And the question is, when I do this, Michael, does this mean that when I do this, I'm actually both the I am self and the I am thought simultaneously?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. That is,
Well,
I, I am, I am
yes.
refers to our being. Our being is not a thought. When Bhagavan talked about the thought called I, he's referring to ego, which is the adjunct conflated awareness. I am Ted.
So
So,
use that
so
word ego then.
I am Ted is a thought. That is ego.
Yeah.
That is that which is aware of itself as I am Ted is ego, which is a thought.
So when I
But
start this process, I begin as the I am
yeah,
ego
yeah,
thought.
yeah. This self-investigation, what is to investigate itself is only ego. So we all start from ego
Yeah.
because
And
as
I
we actually are,
purposely,
we don't need to investigate ourselves in sleep because in sleep we're just aware I am. We're not aware of anything else. It's only when we rise as ego, we superimpose this false awareness, I am Ted, on ourselves. So we need to investigate this fundamental awareness I am.
okay. And you say once you reach the I am self, the I am ego thought will start to fade away. Is that
Yeah,
what
yeah,
you said?
yeah, that's one way of putting it. That is how Bhagavan expressed it. That is, ego rises, stands, and flourishes by attending to things other than itself. But by attending to itself, it subsides.
Very good. That really helped.
This is a very, very useful clue. If ever we are agitated, we can try it ourselves. There's so many things happen in life that agitate us, or we're troubled by some particular thought or some worry, or we're suffering some pain or bereavement or whatever it is. If we turn our attention back to ourselves, everything quietens down. Um, I mean, the most effective way to uh, quieten the mind is simply to attend to ourselves. Because when we attend to ourselves, we as ego subside, so all our activity, mental activity subsides along with us. So the more we attend to ourselves, the more we subside.
Which should be our daily practice.
Yes,
Yeah. Thank
Bhagavan
you.
says always, we should be always trying to do this.
Yeah. And you're making it easier for, I think, many of us with your repetition of be persistent, which
Yeah,
is probably the most important lesson.
it is the most important. It all depends upon persistence.
Listen, we've got up 12 to 14 questions in the chat box. I don't want to miss out on a couple other questions. I know Lonnie has a good question that's coming up second that she sent in to me yesterday, and you have it listed here. But let's go to Harshita because she's asking something important. And Harshita, are you with us? Do you want to just frame your question to Michael yourself?
Okay, so my question is pretty basic. I keep hearing that when you say turn your attention back to ourselves as pure awareness, I just want to clarify that my understanding of this is correct. I My understanding is that this cannot be done with the use of intellect alone, because initially we may have to put in effort and use that intellect to not get carried away by all these different thoughts that arise during this process of investigation. But to go from that I am something like the body or mind, or that I ego, let's call it ego, to that pure awareness, I don't think it can be achieved by the use of intellect, right? That's where I keep getting stuck.
Right. Okay. The role intellect has in this, intellect is the power of distinguishing one thing from another. That is, viveka is required. Viveka is that ability to distinguish what is real from what is unreal, what is permanent from what is impermanent, what is the subject, the seer, from all the objects. So, in that sense, we are using the intellect, not using the intellect to think complicated things, but using the intellect to to clearly see the distinction between ourself as the knower from everything else that is known. But that's not it. That's a very subtle use of the intellect. And because if we don't distinguish ourselves from other things, we won't be correctly attending to ourselves. So we need to distinguish ourselves. This is why in classical Advaita, they have what are called prakriyas. Prakriyas are things like drikdrisya viveka, understanding the distinction between the seer and the seen. What we have to investigate is the seer. Analyzing the three states is another prakriya. Distinguishing what is permanent from what is impermanent is another prakriya. Distinguishing what is changing from what is unchanging is another prakriya. But all these, they initially, we have to understand these things, but then we have to apply that understanding. For example, once we understand the distinction between the seer and the seen, we have to apply that understanding by attending only to ourself, the seer, and not to anything that is seen. In other words, we have to attend to the subject, not to any object. So that's applied use of the intellect.
Okay, Harshita?
Is that a clear answer, Harshita?
Yes, it is. But I think I have another question, but that's similar to George Lina. So I'll let her ask, or I'll let him ask.
Okay, thank you, Harshita. Chandra, you've got a question, a long question in the chat box that you wanted to ask Michael. Can you condense it a little bit? It goes into several different directions.
If there are several questions you want to ask, it may be easier to ask one at a time, because if you ask a series of questions, by the time you've come to the last one, I'll have forgotten the first one.
Excellent. So Chandra, can you boil it down to one key point you'd like to make?
No, not just one. Ask all the points, but ask one by one.
Okay. Go ahead, Chandra.
Yeah, I really have just two related questions. The first one is, can you talk a little bit about Spuranam?
Spurana simply means clarity. That's the simplest way to put it. I think you're a Tamilian, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
So, if you want to ask someone, do you understand? How do you say? You say puriyama. Enaku puriyam. That verb puri is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit verb spur, which means to be clear. So when you ask puriyama, you're asking, is it clear? Yes, it is clear to me. That's how we say it in Tamil. So that's what Bhagavan means by spurana. It's just that clarity of self-awareness. That is, so long as we're looking, our attention is going outwards towards other things, we're always aware I am, but that I am is in the background, so to speak, because our attention is on other things. When we turn our attention away from other things, back towards this I am, we get a fresh clarity of awareness. That fresh clarity of self-awareness is what Bhagavan means by spurana. It's not something mysterious like people, and it's not what many people, it's not a vibration, it's not a palpitation, it's not a throbbing, it's not a I throbbing, because all a throbbing or a vibration or any of these things is a phenomenon, something known. The spurana is a clarity of the nature of the knower. So it's a clarity of self-awareness.
So does it happen during the practice, or is it after the annihilation of?
No, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent we are experiencing spurana. The final full clarity is also described as spurana. For example, in the Sanskrit version of verse, I think verse 19 or 20, let me just get it, of Upadesha Sara, it gives an example of how Bhagavan uses it. In verse 20 of Upadesha Undya, what Bhagavan says is, Nanon Tanatu Nanan Ena Tondradu, Tana ha Tondrame Undipara, Tan Adu Pundramam Undipara. What that means is, in the place where I merges, that, for one, appears spontaneously as I am I. So the word that he uses here is tondrame. In Sanskrit, he translates that as spurati. In Sanskrit, he says, ahami nasa bhaji. That's on I undergoing annihilation. That means when I undergoes annihilation, aham teya spurati hritvayam. The heart shines forth spontaneously as I am I. So there he's using words, the verb spurati, but that is the full clarity. During practice, we're experiencing a certain degree of clarity. When that clarity becomes purna, he says that is paramapurna sat, the supreme whole reality. When it becomes full, when it comes whole, infinite, then that is self-knowledge. So it's during practice we experience certain degrees of clarity, which is called sparana. The full degree of clarity is the final annihilation, is what shines forth when ego is annihilated. In fact, that shining forth and the annihilation of ego, they're not two separate things, that one has to go before the other. They're the same thing. Ego is destroyed by that full clarity.
Last question on that. When I practice, I don't seem to get anything new. Like I don't, so I don't know. Am I doing it maybe incorrectly?
Okay. When normally our attention is going outwards towards things other than ourselves. So our attention is fully engrossed in other things. When we withdraw our attention back towards ourselves, we begin to experience ourselves with a fresh degree of clarity. We begin to recognize that we are something distinct from this person we take ourselves to be. It's very difficult to put it in words, but there is, if we are really investigating ourselves, there will be to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent there is a clarity. Then the understanding I am not this body is more than just a superficial intellectual understanding. It becomes clearer and clearer. Though we haven't completely shed this false identification, I am this body. It's still there, but we're able to clearly see a distinction between ourselves and whatever we mistake ourselves to be. That's why Bhagavan often described this sparana as nan or aham, which is usually translated in English as I-I, which is actually a mistranslation. Aham or nan means I am I. That is so long as we are attending to other things, we experience ourselves as I am this, nanidu. I am this body. But to the extent to which we draw our attention back towards to ourselves, focus our attention on ourselves, we begin to recognize, who am I? I am I, nothing other than I. Is that clear?
Yeah, that's very clear. Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Dan.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, Joe Michael's here. And Joe Michael, you've got a pretty good question. You want to pose it yourself to Michael?
Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for being open to Bhagavan's grace that somehow empowers you to be so helpful to us. The question, and forgive the wording, it seems to me that Bhagavan implied that me, must find my own way in through as constant as possible self-attention.
Yes.
That seems to me that I have to develop my own way of practicing while persevering and deepening the understanding as much as I can through the grace of Ramana. Could you speak about this current interpretation?
That is, the way is the same for everyone. That is, self-attention is something so simple. There can't be different types of self-attention. There are different degrees of depth of self-attention, but essentially, this path of self-investigation is self-attention from the beginning to the end. So it's the same for everyone. But to understand it, we each need to understand it for ourselves. In that sense, it is said we each need to find our own way. It's not that it's a different way for every one of us, but there's only one way. That is, the way is back towards ourselves. But we've each got to understand it and put it into practice for ourselves. Is that clear?
Yes. So I guess it would seem, if I'm under the impression that I have to find my own way, and then that becomes the way, that I would need to be able to check in with, to use the word guru or teacher, I guess to get an idea that I'm on the right track, so to speak, if I could use those words.
That is, the function of the outer guru is to give us teachings in words. The teaching in words are just pointers. But the real guru, the real form of guru, the guru swarupa, is our own being. So the guidance of guru is ever available. But that's why Bhagavan said the ultimate teaching is silence. The silence Bhagavan is talking about is the silence of pure being. That is ever present. However much agitation there may be in the mind, the underlying reality is the silence of pure being. So it's the external form of guru has served its purpose. Bhagavan has given us these teachings. We now have to apply these teachings ourselves, and we are never alone in this because he's always guiding us from inside, giving us the clarity to understand this. People have the usual understanding of guru is a very crude understanding, but guru is a person outside who's an intermediary between you and God or whatever. Bhagavan has given us a far more refined understanding of what is guru. Guru is nothing but our own self. Guru is not an intermediary between us and God. In the 12th paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan said, Kadvalum Guru Bum Unmayal Verala. That means God and Guru are in truth not other. So there is no Guru other than God. That he may appear out externally in human form, as Bhagavan did, in order to give us these teachings. But now he's given us these teachings, his external form has served its purpose. It's up to us now to follow the path he's shown us. And his grace and guidance is always there. His grace and guidance are eternal. They're never lacking. But we can avail ourselves of his grace and guidance only to the extent to which we subside. And we subside to the extent to which we attend to ourselves. So the real teachings of Guru are in silence. And the only way to listen to those silent teachings is self-attentiveness.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Michael, after saying that several times previously to us all, I read the quote in our reading one Sunday where Ramana referred to the only guru accounts as the master within. So that is self. You're really addressing yourself for that corrective.
Yeah. But not ourself as this ego, but ourself as we actually are.
Exactly.
What we actually are is Guru.
Now, many of the statements that I see in the chat happen to be comments rather than questions, I did find one more question, and then we'll move on to somebody different here so we get at least a couple of questions in from the viewers. But Bharath asks quickly, can one just be? Actually, I say that a lot to myself. Can one just be, he asks, isn't that investigating the self?
Yes. How can we investigate being other than by being? But how to just be? What does it mean to Summa Irapadu, Bhagavan says, just being? But what does just being mean? Just being is the state. Bhagavan describes it beautifully in verse 27 of Uludunapadu. Nanu diada ulinile. That means the state in which I is without rising, or the I not rising being state. You can translate it. So that state in just being means being without rising as ego. So how to be without rising as ego? What is I'll tell the meaning of the whole verse. Nano diada ulinile, namaduvai ulinile. That means the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are that, in which that refers to Brahman. So in order to experience ourselves as Brahman, we need to be without rising. So how to be without rising? He says in the next sentence, second sentence is a rhetorical question, but it answers the question how to be without rising. He says, without investigating the place where I rises, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. The annihilation of oneself means manonasa, the annihilation of ego. That is the state he's referring to when he talks about I being without rising. But that is in order to be eternally without rising, we need to annihilate ourselves as ego. And how to achieve that? Without investigating the place where I rises. So what does he mean by the place where I rises? Obviously, he's not talking about a place in time and space. He's using the word place metaphorically to mean the source. So what is the source from which we rise as I? It's from our being. That is the rising I is the I that is aware of itself as I am Ted or I am Michael, or I didn't catch the name of the person who asked the question. Whatever it named it, the I that is aware of itself as I am this person, that is the rising I. The being I is the I that is aware of itself as just I am. They're not two different I's. The being I is the real I. It seems to be now a rising I. So since ego rises by attending to things other than itself, it can subside in such a way that it doesn't rise again only by attending to itself. So when he says, without investigating the place where I rises, he means without investigating our being from which we've risen as ego, how to reach the annihilation of oneself in which I does not rise. So it's only by self-attentiveness that we can be without, but we can just be. So self-attentiveness is the means by which we attain that state of just being.
He also used that phrase about 7 times, which I really like. The way I suggest to myself, and I suppose others are like me in this respect, is that I simply think myself of just being the most natural self I can be. And I let that up to Ramana to decide how close I become to it.
Yeah, but even if we don't even have to think of it in those terms, just attend to what you are. And by attending to what we are, we remain as what we are.
Yeah. I like you speak in shortcuts sometimes. I'm sure you would never use that word, but I like it because it's so simple to all of a sudden put that in my state of mind.
Okay. I was also going to point out to another place where Bhagavan indicates this. In verse 8 of Upadesha Undiyar, that is up to before verse 8, he was talking about the path of bhakti, the practices of puja, japa, and dhyana. That is worship, repetition, and meditation. These actions of body, speech, and mind. Then in verse 8, he says, rather than Anya Bhava, Ananya Bhava, in which he is I, is best among all. What he means by Anya Bhava is when we meditate on God and on a name or form of God, we're taking God to be something other than ourselves. Anya means what is other. So in this context, Anya Bhava means meditating on God as if he was something other than ourselves. So rather than that, Ananya Bhava means, Ananya means what is not other. That means implies not other than ourselves. So Ananya Bhava is when we recognize that he is I, that God is I, and therefore attend to nothing other than I. That is Ananya Bhava. That Bhagavan says is best among all. So what he calls there Ananya Bhava is just self-attentiveness. When we understand that God is what shines in our heart as I, what is the most effective way to meditate on God? To meditate only on I. That's the most direct and effective way to meditate on God. Then in the next verse, verse 9, he says, by the strength of such meditation, being in the state of being which transcends bhavana. Bhavana there implies mental activity, meditation in the form of mental activity, is the parabhakti tattva, the very nature of the truth of supreme devotion. So there he clearly indicates that by the strength of self-attentiveness, we remain in the natural state of being. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we as ego thereby subside. And where do we subside? We subside in our own being.
Michael, I have a short follow-up to it, and I want to understand this deep down. So I know I am, I know I exist, and therefore
yes.
you can just be, given that you know that you are always. But when the ego rises, that's a reminder that that's not real. And you can go back to I am. So I feel, and correct me here if I'm wrong, that you can get to I am by questioning or looking at the ego, which leads you to the root, which is I am. Or you can understand that you are, and you can always be with that being. So isn't that the same thing? You get to this.
It is the same thing, but we need to understand correctly. So long as we are aware of anything other than ourselves, we have risen as ego. So in order to be without rising, we need to attend to our being. As Bhagavan implies in verse 27, when he says, without investigating the place where I rises, in other words, without attending to our being, how to attain that annihilation of oneself in which we remain without rising, in which we can be as we actually are only by attending to ourselves so keenly, but our attention is withdrawn from everything else. Because so long as we're aware of anything other than ourselves, we are not just being. We have risen and are knowing things.
Yes,
the state of just being is where we know nothing other than I am.
Okay, understood. Yeah, the reason I say that is when you say investigate, I think there comes along with it a lot of questions as to if I'm investigating the right way, if I'm doing the practice the right way. But if you basically can sit with just being, then I think that...
Yes, but being in, that is, Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Upadesha Undiyar, Tanai iritale tanai aridalam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. So being and knowing are inseparable. So long as we know anything other than ourselves, we are not being as we actually are. We are rising as ego. Because that which knows other things is ego. Because otherwise we can just imagine it. I'm just being. We can, in effect, we can just be only by attending to our own being. Attending to our own being so keenly that we cease to be aware of other things. That is what is meant by just being.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Someone once sent me a clip of one very popular neo-Advaita type guru, I think he's actually English. I'm not sure. But anyway, he's very, very popular. He's got thousands of followers and everything. So someone sent me a clip of his where he was saying that self investigation taught by Bhagavan is only a secondary way. That's not the primary way. The primary way is just to be. So he said, you are. Why do you want anything other than you know you are? So why do you want anything else? But that's very, very superficial, because we all know we are. Even when we rise as ego, we know we are. But we face all sorts of problems, including eventually we're all going to face death, because we know ourselves as I am this body. So when Bhagavan says just be, it has a very, very deep meaning. It means to be without rising. And in order to be without rising, we need to attend to ourselves so keenly that we cease to be aware of anything else.
And that's,
have you used that phrase before, be without rising?
Hmm?
Have you used that phrase often with us
Yes,
before?
often, because that is Bhagavan's central. When Bhagavan says just be, what does it mean? That just, summa, means without any activity. The first activity is our rising as ego. So just being means being without rising as ego. That's why I referred to verse 27, in which Bhagavan used this beautiful phrase, nan udiyadu ulanile. That means I, not rising, being state.
Great.
thanks, man.
Ra, thank you very much for that. We're going to move on. So since Joanne had the longest question, we're going to turn to Lonnie now, who has the briefest question for today, and I really appreciate it. She asks, how do we avoid objectifying awareness, and how can we tell or how can we know if objectifying awareness is actually happening or not?
Again, it's a matter of understanding. Awareness is the one thing that can never be an object. Awareness is that to which all objects appear. So any object is by definition something other than awareness. All objects are what are called jada. They're devoid of awareness. They're just objects of awareness. So if we understand what awareness means, it's something that cannot be objectified. If there's any objectifying going on, it's because of a lack of understanding of what awareness is. Awareness is that to which all objects appear. So this is a correct understanding is very, very important on this path, because though it's a very simple path, it's a very subtle path. So if we're not clearly understanding, then all sorts of confusions will arise. Whatever is objectified has to be something other than awareness, because awareness is the one thing that can never be an object. The subject can never be an object. The awareness is the knower. Objects are things known. But that doesn't mean awareness is unknown, but it's what knows awareness is only awareness. That is, we know ourselves just by being ourselves. Now we know ourselves as I am this person. I am Lani, I'm Michael, I'm Ted, I'm whoever. That is ego. So it's only in the view of ego that awareness of other things arise. But even when we are aware of ourselves as I am Lani, we don't cease to be aware I am. That is, the fundamental awareness I am is implicit in everything else. You can't be aware of anything without being aware I am. Because who is aware? I am aware. I am is the natural name of awareness. And I am can never be an object. It's our very being.
Let's take that third question, because it's overlapping with some of what you've already spoke about, I think. And I think it's good to hear what you have to add to it through this person's lens. It's from a YouTube comment. We don't have the name of the person, and I'll just read the question. Michael, is it still not clear to me? Michael, it is still not clear to me how pure awareness says I am. As soon as I pops up, it's ego. Is there a non-egoic I? I don't think it's possible to have an I as pure awareness. For what would it mean? Why would pure awareness need to say I? As soon as it says I, it is already not pure awareness. The whole principle of the teaching is to annihilate any sense of I. What for, if after having achieved that I returns as the great I? I hear that this I is the one without adjuncts. It is also without identity, as to whom the I refers. What would such identity be? And finally, in other words, why isn't the whole idea of I not given up at the stage of pure awareness? Did you follow all that?
At the stage of pure awareness, all idea of I ceases. Because pure awareness is not an idea. Pure awareness is I as it actually is. That is, I is the natural name of awareness. As awareness, we are always aware of ourselves as I. It's not the word. We are not talking about the word I, but what the word I refers to. So whatever the language may be, if it in Sanskrit it's aham, in Tamil it's nan, in English it's I, in French it's je, in Spanish it's yo, in Greek it's ego, or Greek and Latin I think it's ego. So the word differs, but what the word I refers to, in every language there is a first person pronoun, a pronoun that refers to the self-referential pronoun. That is the natural name of awareness. That is, awareness is always aware of itself as I. Again, I'm not talking about the words I, but we cannot be aware without being aware that we are aware. So the awareness I am is intrinsic to awareness. There's no such thing as awareness without the awareness I am. So the awareness I am is the fundamental awareness. The I that pops up, the I that says I am, is ego. Ego is that same fundamental awareness I am, but mixed with adjuncts. This person asks, I hear that this I is the one without adjuncts. Is it also without identity? Being without adjuncts, being without identity. That is, ego is that which is aware of itself as I am this or I am that. The pure I am is not aware of itself as this or that. It's aware of itself only as I. That's why Bhagavan described it as I am I. What is I? I is nothing other than I. I am I. So that is the ultimate truth. So there's the identity of I is only I. So what does the I refer to? It refers only to I. It refers to the awareness itself. So we need to see beyond the words to understand what the words are referring to. The first person pronoun I, in whatever language, refers to the subject, to the knower. In its purity, the subject is just pure awareness. But as the subject, it's not pure awareness, but the adjunct conflated awareness, I am whoever, I am this person, I am this body. So what needs to be annihilated is the adjunct conflated I, the rising I. But the being I always remains. The being I is the pure awareness. The pure awareness never says I. Pure awareness is not a sayer. Pure awareness is just pure being. So it doesn't say I. It is I. That's all there is to say about it. That it's nothing other than I. So what ceases to exist is the false identity. I am this or I am that. What remains is the pure I. the I without adjuncts, the I without any identity other than itself. So the whole Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. Brahman is nothing other than I. Shivoham, I am Shiva. Shiva is nothing other than I. God is nothing other than I. We are nothing other than I. I is the only reality. The problem is when that I mixes with adjuncts and rises as I am this or I am that. That is the whole problem. I don't know if the person who asked this, it was asked under the name Jazz Snare, I think, which I'm not sure. I have a feeling it may have been Stephen, because Stephen asked a similar question last time. So if you're here, Stephen, is this a clear answer?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask.
Well, give it a try, Stephen. What do you think?
Well, let me turn that on.
We hear you.
Yeah.
Or if you'd rather pass, just say so.
Yeah,
Can I ask you a question then? When ego ceases to exist, do you cease to exist?
Ego. I don't know.
Ego is something that appears and disappears. Ego ceases to exist every night when you fall asleep. Do you cease to exist in sleep? No. You were very clearly aware when you woke up in the morning, I was asleep. So I persist throughout all the three states. I is the only thing that is real. I is Satchit. It is pure being and pure awareness. That is the real I.
Yeah, I just don't think I'll ever get how the pure awareness would have an I at all.
It doesn't have an I.
It's refers to a subject or identity or a limit of some kind.
No, it refers to awareness itself. Essentially, behind all the adjuncts, what I refers to is just awareness, being awareness, Satchit.
But it seems to be totally impersonal, and I seems to be personal.
No, I seems to be personal because now we identify I with a person. But I isn't neither personal nor impersonal. It transcends all dualities. It transcends all differences. It's transpersonal, neither personal nor impersonal.
Oh.
It is just pure awareness, pure being. If we take I to be something personal, then there's no I. I ceases to exist. Because the personal I is ego, that which has limited itself as I am this person. But what I actually refers to is that which is prior to the person. The person ceases to exist in sleep. Person appears only in waking and dream. But in the absence of the person, I don't cease to exist.
Yeah, I just don't, recognize, my sleep, that I'm there. I would say I'm not there.
You're not there. Then, but don't you feel when you woke up that you were asleep? Don't you naturally feel I was asleep last night?
Well, yes, but I don't. I only remember the dreams. I never remember anything other than
we don't remember sleep in the same way, but we remember dreams, because sleep is a state devoid of phenomena. So it is content-free awareness. So there's nothing to remember about sleep other than I am. All that exists and shines in sleep is that fundamental awareness I am. So we remember having slept, not in the same way, but we remember what we ate for lunch yesterday, or what we did what school we went to when we were a child. That's all recollection of impressions. I am is not an impression. It is the fundamental thing. So we remember having slept. I say remember in inverted commas because there's no other word we recollect or we remember having slept, because we recognize the continuity of our being throughout all three states. We recognize that we even though we were not aware of anything, we existed in sleep, and we were aware of our existence in sleep. Aware of our being. So what I essentially refers to is to that fundamental awareness of being. Satchit. Even say awareness of being. Being is not an object of awareness. That is, the awareness itself is being, and the being itself is awareness. They're not two different things. And that is what the term I ultimately refers to. That's what Bhagavan says.
I guess.
Yes, sorry, say.
Yeah, it's hard to get beyond thinking of I in the ordinary sense of the body mind.
But that's
it's
what
hard for me to think of I as referring to something completely not I, is the way I would put it.
Yeah, because that's what this path is all about. Going beyond this limited conception of ourselves. Now we have a limited conception of ourselves, but we are a person. So we say I is personal. Bhagavan expresses it beautifully in verse 21 of Upadesha. This is after saying that when I dies, that is when ego merges back into its source, one thing appears as I am I. That is that itself is the whole, the infinite whole. Then he says in the next verse, that is at all times the substance of a real import of the word called I, because of the exclusion of our non-existence even in sleep, which is devoid of I. So what he's saying is, in sleep which is devoid of I means what the I that is absent in sleep is ego. Yeah, right? The I that is aware of itself as I am this person. But we don't cease to exist. So what I actually refers to is that which persists even in sleep, and which will persist even after the destruction of ego. That is the fundamental reality. Now that same fundamental reality is what we experience as I am, but instead of experiencing it as it is, we experience it mixed and conflated with adjuncts, as I am Stephen, I am Michael, I am Ted, I am whoever. So our present experience of I is personal, but that's why Bhagavan asks us to investigate this I to find out what it actually is, because what I actually is not a person. It's not even ego, which is the I that is identified as I am a person. It is the reality of ego, the fundamental basis. And that is what we are to investigate. Who am I?
But does it know itself?
It knows itself, yes. It is what is called, in Sanskrit there's a term, swayam prakasa. It's self-shining. That means it knows itself just by being itself. It shines by its own light.
Can it say what it knows, or does it know what it knows?
It doesn't say it. It doesn't say it because saying is a function of the mind. It's the mind that says things. This is the reality that underlies the mind. So it doesn't say I am. It just is I am. It knows itself just by being itself. It doesn't know itself as an object of awareness. It knows itself just by being itself. That's why Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Ulunaptu, Tanai iritle, tanai aridlam. Being oneself alone is knowing oneself. And being oneself, what he means by being oneself is being without rising as I, without rising as ego, without rising as the adjunct conflated I.
Is that kind of knowing really better than the knowing where you actually can say what it is you know and what you think? It sounds like it's less.
That which says what it knows is the mind. That's a very inferior type of knowing. Because that mind appears in waking and dream, it disappears in sleep. It's such an insubstantial, unreal thing. But this is the one thing that exists and shines eternally. Beyond thoughts, beyond words. Thoughts and words arise only after the rising of ego. And ego itself is a transitory appearance.
Stephen, thanks for hanging in there.
Yeah, I didn't expect this to come up, but
yeah, but
it sounded very familiar to me.
But this is very.
Whoever wrote that sounded just like me, and I said it's good that someone else asked that.
Oh, it was someone else. Okay, I thought it was you, but anyway, because you had asked a very similar question last time, and it was on the video of last meeting that someone raised this. But this is a very important point, because what this path is all about is knowing who am I, knowing what this I actually is.
Okay, shall we move on?
Yes.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for hanging in there. And a real quick related question that you might think of, or somebody might think of it as being lighthearted. I don't mean it light at all. For me, it's quite serious. I've heard it explained before, but I still don't get it. If I should die within my sleep, what happens? What happens to my consciousness?
What dies is the body.
Well, the body dies. That which never was.
Sleep is a temporary death. It's a death, not a death of the body, but a death of ego. Mm-hmm. Death in the sense that ego is not at all present in sleep. So, but though it is not present in sleep, it is not destroyed, so it will rise again. So normally at the end of a night's sleep, ego rises again in waking or dream.
Yes.
If the body dies when in the state of sleep, that ego isn't affected in the least. Ego is not affected. Just like if you take off your shirt, you're not affected by it. That's a beautiful analogy used by Krishna in the Gita. But casting off one body and taking on another body is just like when a shirt is worn out, you discard the old shirt and wear a new shirt. So whether the body is discarded in waking or in sleep makes no difference. Ego, that is, though ego doesn't exist in sleep, it hasn't ceased to exist. It's only a temporary cessation. Sleep is a temporary cessation of ego. So until the permanent cessation of ego takes place, which will take place only by means of Atma-vichara, ego will rise again. So instead of rising as I am Ted, it will rise as something else. Or there may even be a temporary time, a short time when it remembers itself as Ted. And it continues to remember that identity until that fades away, and then it takes some other identity. Why I say there may be a temporary time, because from people who report near-death experiences, they don't forget their identity, even though they report experiencing themselves outside the body or all sorts of things they experience, but they still experience themselves as the same person. But so the identity I am this person may endure for some time after death, just like in a dream. but then that'll dissolve, and that memory of that identity will go almost completely. Sometimes people do remember past life, they do have past life, but generally between one life and the next, the memory of the previous lives disappears completely. But that which was previously identified as I am Ted will be identified as I am Tom, or I am Mary, or I am Ramana, or whatever. It'll have some other name and form.
And of course, the answer to the question that I would always ask myself, but I know the answer. So what is consciousness, eternal that it is, conscious of? And it's conscious of self.
No, it's not conscious of self. It's just conscious.
It's just conscious.
Yes. That is, but it is self-shining. That is, it knows itself by being itself. But we can't say it's conscious of self as if self is an object of consciousness.
Okay. Yeah.
That is, it is a knowing of knowing anything other than ourself is an act of knowing. It's a mental activity. But knowing ourself is not an activity. We know ourselves just by being ourselves.
Yeah. I think I read it wrong, or I probably got it wrong, because once I thought for sure I read Ramana saying awareness, pure awareness that's eternal, is only aware of self. But
yeah, I mean, but words are always inadequate. You can, I mean, that's one way of saying it. But what we need to understand when we talk about awareness of self, it's not like awareness of an object. Self can never be an object. That's why he says in verse 26 of Upadeshundya, being oneself alone is knowing oneself, because oneself is not two. In other words, there's not one self to know another self.
We're down to the last few minutes, and we have a question from Lonnie, who presented her question about a half an hour ago. This is a first for her. She's been on this program a lot, but has never spoken. Lonnie, I don't mean to put pressure on you, but what's your comment or question that you have?
Hi, and thank you, Michael and Ted. Earlier, my question was addressed, and then you said, "Is there any follow-up?" And I was disconnected from audio, so I couldn't follow up.
Okay.
So could I do that now?
Yes. What I said was. Okay.
I know
yeah.
said,
okay. Yeah.
I was going to respond to that because, yes, I understand all that intellectually. Sometimes, though, and maybe being specific will help. In turning to awareness, sometimes the objectification question comes up when there's a definite feeling in the body, or I don't know where it is, that comes with being away from the outer and in the inner with awareness. And sometimes I feel like I've objectified that and I'm seeking that feeling and don't want to mix those things up. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yes. That is, when you say you've understood intellectually, what you mean you've understood conceptually. But that conceptual understanding has to become a deeper understanding. The conceptual understanding can only be deepened by practice. So
yes, but I do feel that.
I understand.
I haven't had that experience.
I understand what you mean. I understand what you mean, because this is a very, very subtle. This practice of self-investigation, though it's very simple, it's very subtle, and it's very easy to get caught up in objectification, because the very nature of ego is to grasp objects.
Yes.
So it's always looking for something to grasp, whereas awareness is not a thing to grasp. It's the reality of ego. So it can't.
Yes. How can we make sure we're not doing that?
Well, only by practice. The more we practice, the clearer it will become. The more we will.
Okay.
We will distinguish. We will recognize when we are objectifying. But this is why practice is essential. The skill in practicing comes only with practice.
Yes, and I seek do this all day long. It's not like hasn't been separated to doing meditation practice. It's doing this inquiry all day long, as
That
Bhagavan
is what
recommends.
that is exactly, that's what we should be doing.
Okay, well, maybe I should get out of trying to understand with the intellect and just keep doing what you said.
Yeah. But the conceptual understanding is very important because that guides us.
Yes.
But
Yes.
though we have the conceptual understanding, because it's not deep enough, we sometimes inadvertently slip into a type of objectification. But we need to be alert to that. And
Okay.
what is aware of this, whatever object it may be? It will be a very subtle object, but what is aware of this subtle object? To whom did this subtle object appear? So we always need to be turning our mind more and more back towards ourselves, to go deeper and deeper within.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Robert, we have 2 minutes. Can you get your question in quickly? Go ahead.
Is Bhagavan aware that there seems to be beings acting as if they don't know that the truth of who they are is Bhagavan?
Bhagavan is aware of just being. But there is nothing that Bhagavan is not aware of, because being is all there is. That is, he is that being. So we can't either say that he is aware or he isn't aware. He is aware in the sense that he's aware of the fundamental reality of everything, which is one. So what actually exists is only one, which is Satchit, pure being awareness. That is what Bhagavan actually is. That is what we actually are. But because we've risen as ego, we know that one as many. So we're asking whether Bhagavan knows this many that we know. Bhagavan knows what we know, but he doesn't know it as we know it. What we know as many, he knows as one. Is that at all clear?
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very, very much.
It's very subtle, and our mind can never adequately understand it. If we want to understand Bhagavan's state, we have to be that. Knowing Bhagavan is being Bhagavan. And to be Bhagavan, all we need to do is to cease rising as ego. And to cease rising as ego, all we need to do is to hold fast to self-attentiveness. Because to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we subside. And to the extent to which we subside, we sink back into the pure being that is Bhagavan. That is the only thing that actually exists.
Thank you. You've got our endless love and devotion as friends who appreciate what's here for us on the first Sunday of every month. Thank you very much, and goodbye, everybody. See you next time around.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, everyone.